All right, good evening, everyone. I'll call the meeting to order. I just have some opening remarks. The public meeting is being heard by the City Council Planning Advisory Committee, and public notice has been given in accordance with the Planning Act. The non-elected members of the Planning Advisory Committee are Mr. John Baltutis, Mr. David Joyce, Ms. Catherine Brown, and Mr. Paul Jennings. Citizen appointees may ask questions and participate in the discussion in order to assist in making recommendations to City Council, but may not make motions or vote in connection with the public meeting. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Planning Committee or City Council before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of City Council or the local planning appeal board. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Belleville before the related bylaw is passed, the person and or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing at an appeal before the local planning appeal tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party. Comments received at this public meeting, as well as written comments, will be considered by the Public Advisory Committee members, as well as the Engineering and Development Services Department, in analysis of the applications that were part of the public meeting tonight. A recommendation report will be brought forward upon receipt of all agency and public comments at a future meeting, and the Planning Advisory Committee's recommendations will be forwarded to City Council for consideration. Any person wishing to be advised of the Belleville Planning Advisory Committee's recommendations with respect to today's applications are requested to leave their name and address on the appropriate notification sheet located on the clipboard beside the podium. So for attendance, I see everyone is in attendance. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof? Seeing none. Public meeting, the Planning Act, 3.1, notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for application for proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 314 as amended, 4807 Old Highway 2, City of Belleville, County of Hastings, file number B-77-1080. The applicant owner is Ray and Jean O'Neill. And Mr. Ashton, present the application, please.
So this is an initial public meeting held in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act. The purpose of this meeting is for committee members to formally hear and receive public comments, which will be reviewed as part of a future recommendation report from staff. So 4807 Old Highway 2 received approval for a severance on March 27, 2019, and a condition of severance is to rezone the lands from prime agricultural zone to rural residential zone and rural zone. The lands are designated rural in the official plan. That concludes the brief overview of the application by staff.
Thank you. Is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of the application? Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the application? And a third time, I'll ask anybody wishing to speak in favor of the application. Is there anyone wishing to oppose the application? Anyone in opposition of the application? And a third and final time, anyone wishing to speak against the application? Seeing none, I get a motion to refer this to the Planning Advisory Committee. Councillor Sanderson and Councillor Kelly. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. 3.2, notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for application for proposed amendment to zoning bylaws number 3014 and to 2076-80 as amended regarding agritourism, City of Belleville, County of Hastings, file number B-77-1081. Applicant is the City of Belleville. And Mr. Ashton.
Okay, so one of the uses that's been evolving over the years has been the introduction of agritourism uses in the rural and agricultural lands of the municipalities. Some municipalities see these uses as providing economic opportunities for landowners that are located outside of urban areas, which allow for traditional rural uses to continue with these accessory uses. The provincial policy statement supports the long-term protection of these areas, and one of the methods that is supported by the PPS is through agritourism uses, which are defined in the PPS as meaning those farm-related tourism uses, including limited accommodations such as bed and breakfast, that promote the enjoyment, education, or activities related to the farm operation. There are also supporting policies in the official plan that speak to agritourism uses. The city's proposal is to add a definition for agritourism to zoning bylaws numbered 3014 and 207680. Agritourism uses could also be listed as permitted accessory uses in the prime agricultural and rural zones in bylaw 3014, and they'll also be proposed to be listed as accessory uses in the agricultural A1 and A2 zones as accessory uses in bylaws 207680. So the challenge as part of this exercise will be defining what an agritourism use is and to differentiate it from rural commercial areas. So as part of this process, staff have contacted the Ontario Ministry of Agricultural, Food and Rural Affairs. We'll also be meeting with the County of Hastings in order to identify any agricultural organizations that should be identified as stakeholders for their feedback. And additionally, the Chamber of Commerce will be contacted for comment. As well, a number of municipalities that have implemented or are undertaking in similar initiatives to permit on-farm diversified uses will be reviewed to determine if they can be applied in Belleville's rural and agricultural lands. So with this process, there will be a number of steps required before a final staff report is brought back to Council, and we're looking forward to comments through either this public meeting or through outreach to organizations in the upcoming weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Ashton. So it's a City of Belleville application, but nonetheless, it has some opportunities for the public. So I'll call as anyone wishing to speak in favor of the application. If so, come forward. Just press the button on the microphone there to activate it and say your name. And
hello, my name is Jamie Chisholm. We have a barn and a farm property that would fall into this agricultural tourism. So basically just a brief overview of how it would benefit us is we already have a renovated barn that we spent lots of hours and money to renovate and make sure it doesn't fall into disrepair. It's already been structurally approved by an engineer and then TED as well with the city. It's a seasonal family-run operation, and we're finding it more and more difficult to survive in today's changing landscape. The goal is to be able to have another use for the barn and property to allow us the ability to maintain the property and the building and not see another 100-year-old barn fall into disrepair. Agricultural tourism is a new way for us to keep the property vibrant. It doesn't really, we have no plan to change the land itself or the footprint of the buildings. We just want to add this use to the property to allow us to keep it vibrant, like I said, as well as give us enough funds to be able to keep maintaining the property the way that it requires. So as far as the agricultural tourism, we already have Christmas trees planted. It's an area where people have come to take photos. We want to have some more walking trails, local bands, that type of thing, some events, charity events, paint nights. It was brought to our attention, there's 4 other examples of barns similar to ours that have been approved in neighboring counties for the use that this zoning amendment is proposing. There's 3 barns in Prince Edward County, and then there's the McKinnon Brothers barn in the Bath-Napanee area as well. So we basically feel like agricultural tourism will allow us to keep the barn maintained and keep it in the family for years to come.
okay, thank you, Mr. Chisholm. Is there any questions from the committee? Okay. Is there anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the application? I've asked 3 times. So anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the application? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the application? And finally, a 3rd time, anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the application? Can I get a motion to refer that to the Plan Advisory Committee? Councillor Sanderson, Councillor Culhane, thank you. Any questions? All in favor? Motion's carried. 3.3, Notice of Complete Application, Introductory Public Meeting for Application for Proposed Amendment to Zoning Bylaw Number 3014 as amended, 288 Pine Hill Crescent, City of Belleville, County of Hastings, file number B-77-1082. Applicant is Tom Reed, agent is Eleanor McAvee, and owner is Tom Reed and Eleanor McAvee. Mr. Ashton.
So this is the initial public meeting held in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act. So that, again, the purpose of this meeting is for committee members to formally hear and receive public comments, which will be reviewed as part of a future recommendation report from staff. The subject lands received approval for consent, and a condition of that consent was to rezone the lands from the prime ag zone to rural residential and rural zone. So the lands are designated rural in the official plan, and this concludes the brief overview of this application.
Thank you. Is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of the application? The microphone is activated. If you could just state your name.
I'm Eleanor McAvoy, and I'm here for any questions that the council may have. I don't really have anything to say.
Thank you. That's okay. Any questions from the committee? Well, I don't see any. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the application? And a third time, anyone wishing to speak in favor of the application? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the application? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the application? And a third and final time, anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the application? Thank you. Could I get a motion to refer this to Plan Advisory Committee? Councillor Culhane, Councillor Kelly, all in favor? Motion's carried. 3.4, Notice of Complete Application, Introductory Public Meeting for Application for Proposed Amendment to Zoning Bylaw Number 10245 as amended, 125 South Church Street, City of Belleville, County of Hastings, file number B-77-1083. Applicant owner is Myers Creek Development Group. Agent is Joe Chinook. Mr. Ashton.
So this is an initial public meeting held in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act. The purpose of this meeting is for committee members to formally hear and receive public comments, which will be reviewed as part of a future recommendation report from staff. The city has received an application to add methadone clinic as a permitted use at this site. The current zoning of this property is both general commercial C2 and non-retail C5 zone. The C2 zone, which contains the building, does permit a medical clinic. However, through an update to the bylaw in 2012, the use methadone clinic was defined and established as a use separate from medical clinic, and because the use methadone clinic was not added as a permitted main use to any of the existing zones, there is a requirement for a site-specific zoning application if a methadone clinic wants to be recognized as the main use at a property. And then also as another note, methadone clinics are permitted as accessory uses at pharmacies. And that concludes the brief overview by staff of this application.
Thank you. Is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of the application? Please come forward. The microphone is activated. If you could just state your name, please.
My name is Kate Johnston, and I'm the Director of Operations for Canadian Addiction Treatment Centres. So we currently operate an opiate agonist treatment clinic on Front Street in Belleville. We've been there since for over a decade, and we know that there has been a desire for our clinic to not be located on Front Street in the downtown core. We have also wanted to move so that we could have a newer, larger facility for our patients that is in a better state of repairs, and so we can offer additional expanded services to our patients. The reason that we would like to move into the Church Street location is because it is a single site with on-site parking for both our employees and our patients.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there any questions from, yes, Councillor Kelly?
Stand up?
No, you're fine.
Okay, thank you. Hi, just a couple questions. You mentioned expanded services. Are we talking hours?
If we were to expand our operating hours, then I'm not 100% sure we would do this yet, but we would look to open earlier in the mornings.
Okay, and at your current location with the patients, how many weekly patients would come to the clinic? Is that public knowledge, or is that confidential?
It's not necessarily confidential. It changes day to day given the cohort, but it is approximately 375 patients. They do not all enter the premises on a daily basis. Less than 1/3 would be through the doors on a daily basis.
Final question, through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
You mentioned 375 weekly patients. What is the time frame for a patient to get looked at and then leave the property? Is it a 5-minute, 10 minutes? I'm just trying to get myself around how long that transition is.
Right. That's a very difficult answer because it depends on the patient. So some patients are in for minutes at a time. Other patients are in for longer encounters. So they may be having an appointment with their physician, in which case that appointment, they could be in the building for upwards of 30 minutes. We are looking to expand services and have case management and addiction counseling on site. So in those situations, if a patient was coming to see a counselor and their physician, they may be in for the building for a longer period of time. We also offer additional services in the forms of treatment for other medical conditions. So if a patient had to have laboratory investigations or an ECG or some sort of investigation like that, they could be in the building for longer. It's very similar to any sort of medical clinic or a healthcare provider where you could experience different kind of wait times depending on why you're there.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Culhane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. There's a great concern about violence on the premises, around the premises. I'll have to ask you directly, have you had an issue?
Not with violence, no. I was reading some of the letters that were written, and there's often a concern about an increase in crime. And I find that an interesting concern because one of the things that we know, patients who are on OAT, opiate agonist treatment, typically experience a decrease in criminality. So it's actually people who are addicted to opioids that are not being treated where you would see greater criminal behavior. But patients who are on treatment are not a cohort of the population that you need to be concerned about an increase in crime rates.
It's, thank you. It's not a concern of mine having experience in that area, but people have a number of fears. Criminal activity, violence, there's a repeated concern of needles, but your patients have no need for needles.
It is a harm reduction based program, which means that it's not abstinence based.
It's oral, right?
It is oral, that's right. We provide harm reduction services from within our location in conjunction with the public health unit. And typically when you're offering harm reduction services, which would be harm reduction supplies, you open that up to anybody who needs to use them, and it may not be, so you could have patients, you could have consumers of harm reduction supplies accessing them in our location that aren't necessarily patients of our program.
Well, just to be clear to the people in the room, the needle situation is not limited to the area around the OATC. It's from one end of the street, well, all the way around. I went with the police the other day, and it's a problem that we'll have to address somehow, but I don't believe it has anything to do with your clinic.
Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, Ms. Johnson, I have one, not so much for my own benefit. I'm 22 years with the Correctional Service, so I'm familiar with methadone, Suboxone, and understand it. But could you explain a little bit for public knowledge, because I have seen a lot of comments to just explain the actual, if you can, some of the medical side of it and what OAT and Suboxone and methadone, what it actually does physiologically, and how does it help with addiction?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So opioids, the opioid class of medication is such that the human body, when opioids are taken for a prolonged period of time, develops a dependence to it. And so people who become dependent physically on opioids are unable to stop using them without experiencing an opioid withdrawal syndrome, which is very, very difficult for humans to tolerate. And it looks very much like a very extreme influenza. And so people who have to work or parent or go to school or function typically can't withstand opioid withdrawal. And that's where opiate agonist treatment comes in. So 2 medications are used, methadone and buprenorphine / naloxone, otherwise known as Suboxone. And what happens is that is replacement therapy. So people typically are using short-acting opioids, either by prescription, illicitly by prescription opioids from the street, or illicit opioids such as fentanyl or heroin. And so those are all really short-acting opioids. What happens is with opioid dependence, the patient or the person's tolerance increases. And so the longer they're dependent, the more opioid they need just to feel okay and not experience opioid withdrawal. So methadone and buprenorphine are long-acting opioids, and when prescribed by a physician, the optimal dose will last the patient or the individual 24 hours with no symptoms of withdrawal. So they are safely given an opioid, and that helps to improve their functioning. So they no longer have to go through this cycle of use, withdrawal, find an opioid, use, feel better, withdrawal, find an opioid in that cycle. And so what happens when someone comes to an opioid agonist treatment program is that they see a physician who does a thorough investigation into their health and what could be a very complex background, and then the medication is prescribed. And it's the medication combined with the daily interventions at the clinic or the pharmacy level where you start to see an improved functioning in the patient's life. And oftentimes people can very successfully be maintained on methadone or buprenorphine to a point where they can be tapered off the medication. And the drivers of addiction are very, very complex. So things like concurrent disorders, histories of trauma, and chronic pain are also other considerations.
Thank
that
you.
help?
Yep, no, that's helpful. I've got a couple other questions.
Okay.
Because I know that other pharmacies in our community dispense methadone. And can you explain, just for knowledge, the direct administration of the medication at, say, your facility versus a patient who's able to actually carry their medication, so say pick it up at a drugstore?
Right. So the CPSO guidelines suggest that patients, depending on the stability or the abstinence that they exhibit, should be have their medication witnessed either in our clinic or in a pharmacy, or patients can be given what we refer to as carries or take-home doses. And so many patients can take their medication home to self-administer, just the way that you or I do self-administer any medication at home after we pick it up in the pharmacy. So because our hours don't suit people who work or live in a different community, because we do serve the rural catchment area, there are patients who come to our clinic for treatment but get their medication outside of our clinic in a Shoppers Drug Mart or a Rexall setting. And we try to be the people that there's research right now that indicates that patients are 4 times more likely to have positive outcomes on treatment if they get their medication and their pharmacy and their medical services together in one building, which is why our clinic exists. So 4 times greater outcomes is a pretty powerful number.
Thank you. And one last question I have is, and typically there's the connotation of the drug user that one hears from and assumes, and they're picking up dirty needles or breaking into cars, et cetera, et cetera. You also refer to people going to school, going to work. So the question I have is, and it's been well documented in the news in terms of opioid addiction and overprescription of pain medication. In terms of your clientele, how many do you see that are functioning citizens of our community or the catchment area who have ended up having to use your services because of overprescription or addiction to what was prescribed medication?
So that's a growing number. That cohort of our patient base is a growing number, and I can't speak directly to the Belleville number, but it used to be less than 15%. What happens because of the opioid prescribing guidelines for non-cancer pain, and the different attempts at sort of curbing the high rates of prescription opioids. As physicians are being looked at for their inappropriate or their high prescribing, it's very common for them to step away or stop providing care to a patient. So I can't give you a number, but we are seeing increasing numbers of people who were being maintained on opioid prescriptions by their primary health care provider, and their primary health care provider retires, and as you know, there are not enough primary health care providers, so there isn't anyone to take over their care, and those people who are opioid dependent are forced to have to use opioids illicitly from the street. The other alternative is that their physician is still able to provide their primary health care, but they're no longer licensed to prescribe narcotics. Same situation. If you're opioid dependent, you can't just stop opioids. And so it's very complicated. There are a number of factors that contribute to that.
So it's simple to say this could be friends and neighbors.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments? Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the application? Anyone else wishing to come forward, and the microphone is activated?
Hello, my name's Zubin Gillespie, and I live in the downtown. I wasn't expecting to speak tonight, but I'd just like to mention to everybody, I've been living in the downtown for 8 years. I come from Vancouver originally and then to Calgary. What has been extraordinary for me living in the downtown is not once in 8 years of living downtown was my car ever broken into. My buildings, which we restore buildings in the downtown, have a lot of money and tools. Nothing was broken down. The other interesting thing is that with the current methadone treatment center, I would say I've never seen any fighting going on. I would say the patrons visiting there are polite, they're friendly. You know, they're okay. But I think by moving from the downtown area to the new area, I would think that for sure, probably the local tenants are concerned with this happening. But I just say, from my own experiences, it's been fine. You know, there is a stigma against methadone users, and there's a lot of people needing help, but they come in the morning and then they're gone quickly. So that's all I'd like to say.
Thank you. Is there any questions, Mr. Gillespie? No? Thank you very much. And is anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the application? Okay, seeing none. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the application? Anyone? Yep, please come forward. The microphone is activated. If you could just state your name.
Barry Jakoski, one of the Dairy Queen, 74 Dundas Street, East Belleville. I sent an email Sunday. I hope most of you got it. Sent it to Mayor Panchuk. He was going to forward it to everybody.
Yes, the committee has received that correspondence and will formally receive it here later in the meeting.
Okay. My concern is, well, you asked numbers, 375 a week. We're doing 998 transactions Sunday. And a transaction could be a husband and his wife, a grandma and their grandkids, you know, somebody with their family, school or a sports team. So if you're looking at numbers, that's just some numbers that we're having traffic through our business. It's been a family business since 1967, and we have our lives invested. Now, I understand the internet is not all full of truths, but if you do a quick search on the effects of a methadone clinic on the local community, it's pretty hard to find something positive. We have lots of teenagers as employees, coming and going at all hours in the summertime. We are open 9 a.m. to midnight. I just express my concern with the way it may be going. It's been made pretty clear that the movement of the clinic from downtown is great for the downtown. But having said that, moving it to another business residential area can't be great for that area. Just wanted to voice my concerns. Okay.
Thank you. Is there any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Yeah, please come forward. State your name.
Hi, I'm Ashley Retzi, and I live at 73 Dundas, and I have children there, and I don't think it's very appropriate to have people like that around for my children to see, considering their bus stop is right up the road on Church Street by the bus terminal, and there's not even another one over the tracks 15 to 20 feet away. I don't think that that's very appropriate for young children to be seeing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just any questions? No? No. Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? You come forward, state your name, please.
My name is Dennis Newman. I'm a taxpayer here in the city of Belleville. I want this to be a win-win situation for both the people in this area. There's a very growing business area here as well as residential component related to our bay shore. I want us to follow a norm. In other words, in other locales, where are they located within the communities? Do we fit the same standard and milieu that we have or are considering? And if it's a standard, for example, we have a railroad track here. It in itself is not a definitive thing, but it's not an ideal thing to have. The other question I have is about process. I read in the paper an announcement. I inadvertently was talking to some businesses who I deal with in this area, and according to them, they were not approached in advance of the notice in the paper. I find that concerning, and I invite you to consider that, to give this fair thought, to work through all the positives and negatives, and come up with a situation that will be amiable to both those in need. And I assure you, if I had a child, I would want the services that this lady has so eloquently provided, but I want them to be in an area that is conducive for them and agreeable and supportive for the community around them. And I appreciate the time to present this. Thank you.
Thank you. Before you run away, Mr. Newman, any questions from the committee? I have one. You had a question or concern with regards to process and
Yes, sir.
notice. Could you describe that to us, please, just in terms of?
Yes. I do business with actually a couple of businesses here, but there was one particular business I went to. They had a petition there, and I like to do due diligence when there's a petition. I want to know what I'm signing. I want to know the background. I want to know the intent and the ultimate result. And I asked them, were you aware of this? Because there was a public announcement, which to me meant it was a fait accompli. The answer I got was no. I hope I'm wrong on that, and if I am, I apologize to all the other businesses and the counselors who took the time to approach these people. The other thing is downtown. I recall with Mr. Jack Miller and the facade program that downtown was not just downtown, but it incorporated Pinnacle Street and I don't know, I didn't do my due diligence into what constitutes downtown, but I sense that this is part of downtown. And so when we're saying we're getting, I don't know what the words were, moving it from downtown, this, I think, is part of downtown, or certainly related to it. So in the course of your public announcement, I'm just following what I hear, and I hope I've been a constructive part of this process, and I thank you.
Okay, no, I appreciate that, and certainly, anytime there's a zoning change required, an application is required under the Planning Act, there is a sign that's always posted at the location that's being reviewed, and also advertising does go in the local paper as well, as per the Planning Act. So there was communication in terms of the true process here, in addition to whatever announcement you're referring to.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition, please come forward and state your name.
Michael Vout. On behalf of Michael and Glenda Vout, Vout's Denture Center, Vout's Hearing Center, and our properties located at 66 Dundas East and adjoining properties at 147, 149, 151, and 153 Church Street, I'd like to make the following presentation. We have concerns in the notice that the city sent out to the existing residences in the area being a zoning bylaw amendment for 125 South Church Street. It is noted in the second paragraph that the notice reads, the applicant requests a rezoning of a portion of the subject lands. Then in the Appendix 1 that's indicated, it indicates the location of the subject lands. The mapping indicates all of the property fronting on Church Street and a separate property fronting on South John Street, but which doesn't indicate a property address for the South John Street property. This mapping indicates that all of the properties will be rezoned to C2 with special provisions for a methadone dispensary, not just a portion of the property, as per the application, and not indicating what is the total area of the buildings and the properties. I question council as why does this application only indicate 125 South Church Street and does not indicate any property or address on South John Street for the rezoning application. Our mayor says it's a more appropriate location, moving the clinic from the downtown core. But the Church Street area, according to the official plan, is designated as city center, 3.8 of the official plan. This needs to be reviewed by the mayor and the council as to the purpose of the city center designation, identified by previous councils for a vision of a variety of compatible land use in the city's core area, whereby creating a compact, clean, safe, secure, attractive, accessible, and economically stable city center. Uses that to create or are likely to create uses that create or are likely to create impact that would be contrary to this intent should be discouraged from locating in the city center. Thus, the methadone clinic is not compatible. Policies for the city center are designated to encourage and enhance the downtown core as the major focus of economic activity. So to move the methadone clinic to the city center does not concur with the existing official city plan. Our mayor on April 16, 2019 noted, referring to Church Street, and these are quotes that were in the local papers, better for all involved. I think it's more commercial there, much more appropriate location, and it's a matter of having the right business in those spaces downtown. He continues to say downtown needs to attract businesses that will add to the core and continue to attract people to the downtown. Retail shops, restaurants, studios are examples, which again contradicts Belleville's official plan for the subject property, which is within the city center. Catherine Brown, chair of BDIA, says it's about creating an experience and wanting to make downtown something that is walkable and positive for people. We can attract tenants into that location that really fall within the vision and mandate we are trying to undertake, indicating that the downtown methadone dispensary is a deterrent to these factors. Methadone treatment needs to be integrated into our primary care. It needs to be accessible by all patients in a setting not only that provides the methadone treatment required, but also provides the primary care and the mental health counseling and help these patients who may have other addictions and mental health issues. Methadone treatment facilities are funded by the Ministry of Health, and in such should be in a hospital setting where no judgment or prejudice is brought into the methadone program. Also, in a hospital staff setting, the patient confidentiality and privacy are respected and protected. Current funding for private clinics could cause these clinics to close, putting patients at risk. Doctor fees have been reduced by OHIP funding, which in turn has caused private clinic hours and services to be reduced, and as a result, some clinics may close. At Belleville Hospital, I understand that we have vacant space in the Mary Ann Sills wing and possibly some other areas of the hospital that are also vacant. We need to look at a more progressive and a long-term solution for these patients. In other municipalities and hospitals, including St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto, Douglas Memorial Hospital in Fort Erie, and many more within our province have accommodated these clinics. There is no reason that our hospital cannot accommodate these patients that require this care. These patients should be treated with respect and dignity in a clinical hospital setting which can handle any emergency that may arise. Plus, the hospital has other healthcare professionals available for the support of these patients. As such, we are against the proposed zoning bylaw amendment of 125 South Church Street and the property on South John Street. Respectfully submitted, Michael and Glenn Devout.
Thank you, Mr. Rout. Any questions from the committee? Okay, so before you go, actually, two things. Number one, just in terms of reference to the hospital, primary health care, I would suggest that those comments also be shared with our local member of provincial parliament. That's their jurisdiction, not the city's, just in terms of getting your points across to various levels of government. The second issue is with respect to the notice and the portion. I'm going to get Mr. Ashton to speak to that, just in terms of clarification.
So just the actual property has two zones on it. One portion is C2 and the other portion is C5. They're actually one property.
But they're fronting on two streets, so should the application have not indicated that they front on two streets? Does it not have the street, like the John Street, South John Street address, does not have a physical address denoting that parcel of land?
No, so it's identified the entire property as 125 South Church Street.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Come forward and state your name.
My name is Fanny Mang, along with my husband Joshua Mang. We are the property owners of 73 Dundas Street, and we have a few handouts here. Thank you. So I'll just start. Good evening, Planning Advisory Committee. Like I mentioned, my name is Fanny Mang, and this is my husband, Joshua Mang. We are the property owner of 73 Dundas Street. Firstly, we just would like to express that we are not opposed to methadone clinic in general, and because we believe it is a necessary service to the people with opioid addictions. However, we believe the proposed rezoning location is not consistent with the community structure. It will negatively impact the character of the neighborhood, and it will be a disruption of this current stable area, which has many residential properties and family and children-friendly commercial properties. If you can see on the first slide, this is taken from our property, photos from 73 Dundas Street East. The property circled in red, it is actually the proposed methadone dispensary clinic. The lower photo is taken from the proposed clinic's parking lot. Property circled in red is our property. So it's this slide here. So as you can see, it's a very close proximity to our property. You go to the next slide, which talk about misclassification of the zoning. As you can see, the proposed zoning location is surrounded by residential properties. It may not seem obvious from the zoning map. The left graph, which is also on the slides there, is a partial location map that was provided and distributed by the Zoning Advisory Committee. The highlighted ones are actually all residential properties, even though they are zoned commercial. For example, our property is zone C5, non-retail commercial, but it is actually a triplex with 3 families living in the property. So on the right screen, it's actually a screenshot taken from our MPAC, the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. So 125, the number there is the proposed rezoning unit. The unit is surrounded by many residential properties, 6 in total, and they are highlighted in yellow, along with 2 commercial units, which are 65 and 69 Dundas Street. So if you go to the next slide, please, which is titling Neighboring Residential Properties. The 6 adjacent residential properties represent 17 families. So as many of them are multi-residential properties, one of our residents, for example, has 3 young children. Therefore, it is simply incorrect when someone mentioned the proposed location is more commercial area compared to the current clinic in downtown Belleville. So if you could kindly go to the next slide, which is titled Current Methadone Clinics. The proposed zoning property will host the Belleville, Ontario Addiction Treatment Center, which we already know, short term for OATC, which currently locates in downtown Belleville, Front Street. The current downtown location, it is surrounded by all commercial properties in retail zoning. The other methadone clinic, it's called Sunrise Addiction Centers on 450 Dundas Street East. It's also in an all commercial area. So by the way, this clinic, the proposed clinic is actually near the proposed property, 125 South Church Street, which I personally don't really understand why they need 2 methadone clinics nearby each other and almost on the same street, which is Dundas. So if you go to the next slide, which is titled, there's 2 photos there. When you look at the neighborhood, the proposed methadone clinic is not only surrounded by residential properties, but also near or surrounded by commercial properties that have many kids and families as their customers. So for example, nearby this proposed rezoning location, we have a family-friendly medical facilities, and the registered charity, the Children's Safety Village, which is a charity that teaches children, youth, teens, and parent safety skills. And of course, Dairy Queens, which he has already spoke, is a children and family-friendly place. So I understand the reasons to reallocate the methadone clinic from the downtown Belleville. However, the new proposed location is definitely not a better alternative, as you are trying to move this clinic to a residential, family-friendly neighborhood from an all-retail commercial area. Again, we believe the methadone clinic is essential to our community given the opioid crisis. However, the proposed rezoning location is just not the right one. Given the reason already mentioned, it is not consistent with the current neighborhood character, and it will be a disruption of this stable area, which again has many residential properties and family-friendly commercial properties. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions from the committee? No? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak against the application? Please come forward and state your name. And I would just remind public members to make sure that you've signed the clipboards beside the podium as well to be on record. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Jean Chichero, and I'm Chair of the Board of Directors of the Children's Safety Village. And I'm not here in opposition of, but I am here to gather some information. And with respect to the report on this application, I notice under the site review, land uses to the east, that it does mention that the police station is located in that area, but it has no mention of the Children's Safety Village, which is on the city-owned property behind the Belleville Police Service, opposite to that entrance into the back end of the subject property. So I'd like to make note that last year we had 134 classes attend the Children's Safety Village. These classes will be bused in. There's approximately 1 to 2 schools that the classes do walk to the village, but the buses do come down South John Street. They make a turnaround. They come up, cross from where that entrance is, and to the doors of the Children's Safety Village, and they drop the classes off.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any questions from the committee? Just one question I have is, so what time frame would you have classes attend the Safety Village?
There are approximately, could hold 2 classes per day, 5 days a week. But the other thing we do is we have various organizations and groups who utilize the village, and the village therefore is used in the evenings for organizations as well as on Saturdays.
Okay. What time of day would they start, like in the mornings?
Usually around 9 o'clock in the morning. The first class would come 9 till 11, 9 till 11:30.
Okay.
And we teach internet safety. We teach rail safety. We have therapy dogs that come in and teach children. And we also have fire safety taught by the Fire Prevention Department. And we have personal safety, which is taught by the Belleville Police Service, an officer.
Yeah, it's a great program. Thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Jean, since this became public record about 3 weeks ago, with the potential move, have parents at the Safety Village or school boards approached you with some concerns?
No, no.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions from the committee? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to the application? If you come forward and state your name, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Keogh. I'm a resident of South Church Street. I sent an email to the mayor who said he distributed that particular email to you. In that, I suggested a relocation to a non-commercial, non-residential area. As a resident of South Church Street, over the last 8 years, it's really beautified the waterfront area of Belleville, and it's a high-cost area and a high-taxed area. My suggestion was locating it somewhere east on College Street. However, I could amend that also by suggesting it could be put in the public health unit on Park Street, where there's no other residentials or commercial property around that area, or even the old Sears building in the parking lot of the Quinte Mall. I'm very strongly supportive of the confidentiality of the opioid patients, and by placing it in this location, it is not confidential at all, whereas the other 2 suggestions I have would be totally confidential. Nobody would know who they are going in to see the place. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the committee? No? Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition of the application, please come forward and state your name.
Hi, my name is Brad Collar. I currently rent and the owner here as well on 122 South John. And being that it's a dead-end street, there is horrendous traffic coming in and out. There is also a road allowance, and I'm just curious if there's any any inquiries into the traffic and the rear parking lot. You know, is it customer base? Is it for employees? Is it going to be constant traffic, where all the houses on South John are fronted right on the street, and it creates an awful lot of traffic, like blocking driveways, turning arounds, like blocking our street, or our house is at the end. So it creates blockages at the end of the street, and also with the road allowance there going over to South Church, is that going to be a road? Is that going to be blocked? Is that going to be like, a new traffic flow for people that don't know the area? And I'm just curious as to what that's going to cause for traffic flows and for the children on the street, where right now it's being when the other business was there, it was commercial. There was not a lot of traffic flow. And if this is going to be a residential type property, is it going to create a lot of havoc for the children on the street? Is it going to increase traffic flow on a dead-end street where there's only one exit and a lot of turning around and such for traffic flow? That's all I'm curious about.
Okay.
So.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? No? Okay, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Please come forward and state your name.
Hi there, my name is Nicola Robertson. The proposed rezoning and move of the methadone clinic to 125 Church Street, I'm sure you're very aware, has created quite a significant amount of concern among us. And one of those businesses, I'm in 65A Dundas East, which is the property directly north. I'm a physiotherapist and I'm a strong advocate for health and wellness, and I fully support methadone. I've worked in the public health sector in the UK, where we worked with methadone clients all the time. But as a city resident and business owner, I completely appreciate the statements made by the mayor and by Catherine as well with regards to the amount of money that's been put into downtown. My business previously was located in downtown, and I'm a huge advocate. I want to see that area succeed, and I'm committed to that. I feel where our businesses are, we are part of that. I feel part of the downtown. I do most of my shopping in downtown, and I kind of communicate with those business owners. That's where a lot of my clients come from. The proposed move brings several concerns to us. One of them being safety, but primarily the impact on business. And just to go back to the quotes that have already been mentioned, the mayor mentioned putting it into a more appropriate location. It's going to take away some of the reasons why people say they don't come into the downtown. And Catherine Brown from the BDIA said it's been a bit of a challenge with the clientele that was there. So although I appreciate what has been said by Mrs. Johnson and Mr. Gillespie's comments saying he hasn't been aware of anything happening to his property, the impression that has been given to the public is this is not a safe thing to be around. I treat women with young children. I treat pregnant women. I don't want to lose my business over this proposed move. I feel the proposed move has been made without any bigger consideration for the area that it's currently in and the number of businesses that are actually there and residents. Even I wasn't aware of the residential volume until recently. And I feel it's very much a case of not in my backyard. So downtown just wants it out, the downtown area wants it out of their backyard and someone else can deal with that. I appreciate a lot of the problems that are in downtown will continue and need to be resolved, but I really think it doesn't solve the long-term issue of safety. Loitering is the biggest issue at the Bayview Mall. There's a huge loitering issue outside. I know people who own businesses there as well. And I think we have to look at the appropriateness for both the clients of the facility and, if not more so, and the surrounding neighbours.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Any questions from the committee? No? Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to the application?
Hello, I'm Beth Clancy, and I own Split Second Printing. Again, I agree with the whole methadone. I agree. It is something that we definitely need, but unfortunately, with the way things progressed, the way things were presented or not presented to us, we feel betrayed. And I am afraid of possibly what could happen. I don't know that it will, but I don't know that it won't. So the only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to present you, we have a petition. We have several names on here, so I'm not sure if you want these here or if I leave them here.
You want to just leave it there with the sheets, and
Okay.
I'm sure the clerk receives it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Yes, please come forward.
Good evening to all. My name is Chris Bardwell. I purchased in September this year a medical clinic building. It's the north border of the proposed site for the methadone clinic. And I guess the question here is whether the concerns the people in general have are real or perceived. And I would say from speaking to members of our Belleville Police Services to downtown vendors, it's one of the partners who brought the clinic to Belleville to begin with. There are three consistents amongst others that include littering, loitering, and theft. And reports from the City of London from police complaints following the opening of a clinic detail far more than that. So it's pretty obvious from the mayor's comments and from the chair of the DBI's comments that we're so happy they're not here anymore. It pretty comes through as much as they try and disguise those words. The only problem they don't say is we're putting them here now, and I think as people who are in the direct vicinity of that new business, I think we feel somewhat offended.
Okay. Any questions from the committee? No? Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition of the application?
So I just want to add that I don't think anyone here is against the idea or not supporting the unfortunate need for the growing need for methadone clinics. It's just a matter of does not having downtown make it right to put it somewhere else, and where is the right location for it? I don't think this solves the down problems. It may be solved, but maybe not the new vendors where the clinic is now located.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, if you please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Richard Stinchcomb, and I believe we have a letter on file from Myers Creek Brewing Company. One of the concerns I have is the revitalization of the downtown area and the Bayside Trail. It's definitely remarkable. The improvements are amazing, and South Church is one of the most developed residential streets in the area. This street is a major link from the waterfront condo development to downtown, and I believe that based on the residential and commercial tax rates in the city of Belleville, that I would hope that property owners would be involved in decisions like this. I also own a residence, which is the closest residence on Church Street to this location, and my daughter lives there. And I realize this is something we need in our community, but I also think that this residential area is not the place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions at all from the committee? No? Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition of the application? I keep asking because I'm sure people are.
Well, I wanted to make sure everybody
people
else
are
had a
deciding
chance.
whether they want to or not. So
You've already got my letter. I'm Karen from Belleville Sport and Lawn, so I think you all know.
yes, we do have it.
Yep, and I have to say my main concern, we moved to South Church Street in about 1983, and as a property owner and somebody that's contributed to that area and to the city for a lot of years, was a little shocked with the short notice. A sign went up, and the next day it was on the radio that the deal was done. Was a little concerned with the signage for the rezoning, that the sign got put there and then it kept falling down. It became apparent to us the only people that were going to see it was us that were right across the road. So we did keep going and picking it up, and eventually tied it up so it would stay up. It did take quite a while before the letter came from the city. So again, a little disappointment with that kind of disclosure, especially to somebody that's right across the street. In the years, the family and my employees have worked hard. Being a small business, we provide jobs for 14 people right now and their families, and contribute to a lot of charities in the city. But someday we want to retire. and the inherent nature of this and the preconceived notions that people have, whether it's true, not true, whatever, those notions are there. So in effect, my property is worth less money. If in the next few years I decide I want to sell for my retirement, because as a small business owner, that's the only retirement I'm getting, what I again can read online is I can expect a 10 to 17% reduction in my property values. And that makes a major impact on a small business owner. And I'm not the only one there that is and I don't know, people say small business is the backbone of the community. I like to think that it is. We don't have big pensions and benefit plans, and so what we're building there is all we've got. If I have a customer come in, maybe there's not that many, for instances of things that happen, but really all it takes is one. And then a customer doesn't return, or that customer tells other people and they don't return. Barry knows firsthand, there's tons of fast food restaurants in this city that if somebody has a bad experience in his parking lot or in his store, that's going to impact him largely because they don't have to go to Dairy Queen. They can go to McDonald's anywhere or whatever. I do know, and I think other people have commented, of other businesses in the area of other clinics that there are issues. You can try to say that there isn't, but there is, and it only takes one or two to impact that business. And let's face it, every day is a struggle in business, as it is. So I just want everybody to keep that in mind and keep their mind in the, I don't know, in my business we say treat people how you want to be treated. And yes, we understand the methadone clinics, that may be necessary. I agree that it ought to be done in a little more medical, clinical, or a more anonymous. I mean, if I was the person having the problem, I don't think I'd want to be walking into a building that has the big billboard on the front, and everybody driving by the street and walking up and down the street can see me enter and know what I'm there for, versus walking into a general drugstore or a hospital that is much more anonymous. So those are just some of my views, and anybody got any questions of me?
Any questions from the committee? Well, first of all, thank you for fixing the sign. And that's a good community spirit. I appreciate that. And certainly staff have made note of that. I'm going to get Mr. Ashton just to speak on the notification process that's required under the Planning Act, just so there's some understanding amongst the public. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So the notification through the Planning Act is 20 days. Sign is posted, as well as the circulation done to the adjacent property owners. So that is done. And then also we've updated our process this year as well, because sometimes we realize that the mail doesn't always come as fast as it could. So we have updated our process to have a public meeting initially, and then hear all comments before a recommendation report is brought back to council.
Thank you. We have another person at the podium. Go ahead.
Yeah, hello. My name is Alex Soublier. I'm here on behalf of myself and my wife, Lorraine. We're new business owners in Belleville. We purchased the property at 69 Dundas Street East. So our property abuts the proposed 125 Church Street at the rear. And we're a family business, and we were looking for places to expand in Ontario, and we chose Belleville for, I think, all sorts of obvious reasons. Up-and-coming community, and it fits our demographic. And we liked this area of Belleville because I saw a lot of the buildings were starting to turn over. There's a lot of local business owners that had invested a lot of money in making their buildings quite attractive. When you drive down Dundas Street East in this area, you can really see buildings start to turn over. And the building we bought was mostly vacant and in disrepair. It was a former Blue Jays. And I'd like to think that we invested in making it maybe not as attractive as some of the buildings around us, but we did what we could. And it was a significant investment. And we hadn't even owned it for a year. And before we looked at it, of course, we looked at the zoning around and the businesses around and the properties. And so it's a bit of a change for us that we the paint's not even dry on our renovations, and there's a change in the area. And so we're just concerned, I think, with a lot of the same concerns here, that this area is really starting to be nice and a real nice gateway to the city of Belleville and downtown core for everybody coming from the east. And it'd be nice to see that continue and thrive instead of putting a pause or maybe reverse. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? No? Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition of the application? I'll ask one more time. Anyone willing to speak in opposition of the application? Okay, seeing no more, can I get a motion to refer it to the Planning Advisory Committee? Councillor Sandison, Councillor Williams, all in favor? That motion's carried. And I'll get a motion to adjourn this portion of the meeting. Councillor Kelly, Councillor Culhane, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. So now we'll move on to the Planning Advisory Committee. As for attendance, I see everyone is here. Disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Ms. Brown? Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just recess for a couple moments till the public gallery clears out, and then that way the audio will be a little better. We'll resume now that most of the public gallery has exited. So I've already called for a disclosure of pecuniary interest, but I'll ask again. Ms. Brown?
I don't have a direct pecuniary interest, but I just like it noted that I do have my business is in proximity to the current location, and I'm also the chair of the BDIA.
The current location of?
Of the OATC clinic.
Thank you. Anything else? No? Okay, so that's noted. Confirmation of minutes of the City Council Planning Committee meeting and Planning Advisory Committee meeting held on April 1st, 2019. Can I get a motion to receive? Councillor Sanderson. Oh, okay. Councillor Kelly. All in favor? Motion's carried. No deputations. Mr. Clerk? No. Correspondence 5.1, the following letters, emails were received regarding zoning bylaw amendment application B-77-1083 for 125 South Street, Church Street. Dr. A. Belda, S. Fox, J&M Sherritt, C. Truesdale, R. Neal, Kelly or K. Shaw, and B. Hadley. Can I get a motion to receive? Mr. Joyce, Councillor Culhane, all in favor? Motion's carried. I'm going to add 5.2. We received some additional correspondence on email that was on your desk upon arrival, and we also received several handouts on that one presentation. So what I'll do is I'll just do a motion to receive and refer to the applicable application. Councillor Kelly, Councillor Culhane, all in favor? Motion's carried. Referrals from the public meeting. 6.1, notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for application for proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 3014 as amended, 4807 Old Highway 2, City of Belleville, County of Hastings, file number B-77-1080. Applicant owner is Ray and Jean O'Neill. Policy Planners Report Number PP-2019-33. Resolution reads that Report Number PP-2019-33, dated May 6, 2019, regarding notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for application for proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 3014 as amended regarding 4807 Old Highway 2, former Township of Thurlow, City of Belleville, County of Hastings, be received as information, and that staff report back at such time as input from the public, commenting agencies, and municipal departments has been received, assessed, and addressed to the satisfaction of the Engineering and Development Services Department. In a motion, Ms. Brown, Mr. Jennings, any comments? Seeing none, all in favor? The motion's carried. 6.2, notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for application for proposed amendment to zoning bylaws number 3014 and 2076-80 as amended regarding agritourism, City of Belleville, County of Hastings, file number B-77-1081, applicant is City of Belleville. Policy Planners Report Number PP-2019-34. The resolution reads that report number PP-2019-34, dated May 6, 2019, regarding the introductory public meeting for proposed amendment to zoning bylaws number 3014 and 2076-80 as amended regarding agritourism be received as information, and that staff report back at such time as input from the public, commenting agencies, and municipal departments has been received, assessed, and addressed to the satisfaction of the Engineering and Development Services Department. Moved by Mr. Joyce, seconded by Mr. Jennings. Any questions or comments? Yes, Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I just want to comment. I think this is great, and I think it is very forward-thinking to look at agri-tourism. I know that there's been a lot of different municipalities that look at this, and I think the great thing for Belleville is we do have a rural component in the center, but we do have a very strong rural component to our city and region. And as we look to more uses and how we can better that, I definitely think agritourism is something that's great and something that's needed for our city. So I think that's great for staff. And as far as I've seen the policy, it looks very good. And I think if you want to look at something that's been great for agritourism, I think there's a place in Scranton that's called Shroot Farms that's really good as well. But anyhow, you guys did a great job. So,
thank you. Any other comments? All in favor? Motion's carried. 6.3, notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for application for proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 3014 as amended 288 Pine Hill Crescent, City of Belleville, County of Hastings, file number B-77-1082. Applicant is Tom Reed, agent is Eleanor McAvee, and owner is Tom Reed and Eleanor McAvee. Policy Planners Report number PP-2019-35. The resolution reads that report number PP-2019-35 dated May 6, 2019 regarding proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 3014 as amended, part of Lot 1 and 2, Concession 9, 288 Pine Hill Crescent, former Township of Thurlow, now City of Belleville, County of Hastings, be received as information, and that staff report back at such time as input from the public, commenting agencies, and municipal departments has been received, assessed, and addressed to the satisfaction of the Engineering Development Services Department. And a motion, please. Mr. Baltutis, Councillor Culhane. Any questions or comments on that one? All in favor? Motion's carried. 6.4, notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for application for proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 10-245 as amended, 125 South Church Street, City of Belleville, County of Hastings, file number B-77-1083. Applicant owner is Myers Creek Development Group. Agent is Joe Chinook. Manager of Policy Planning's report number PP-2019-36. Correspondence items 5.1 and some from 5.2 refers. Resolution reads that report number PP-2019-36 dated May 6, 2019 regarding proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 10-245 as amended, 125 South Church Street, City of Belleville, County of Hastings be received as information, and that staff report back at such time as input from the public, commenting agencies, and municipal departments has been received, assessed, and addressed to the satisfaction of the Engineering Development Services Department. Get a motion. Councillor Culhane, Mr. Baltutis, any questions or comments for staff as they prepare this recommendation? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So two comments based on some of the input that we heard. I'd like to ask staff to identify the location of the 70 clinics or a portion of the 70 clinics that are located throughout Ontario in terms of where are they located within the city proper. So that's request number one. Request number two is that through the OATC, I'd like to request on them if they have any statistical information that would give us some insight in terms of whether there's any correlation between the location of the methadone clinic and the instance of crime. So, you know, statistically, you know, is crime more prevalent where we see a methadone clinic, or is it neutral? So that kind of information, I think, can come to us from the OATC.
Okay. I might suggest too that staff may have to look through the police service on that. I find it maybe difficult for an agency to, if they don't normally gather statistics for that type of thing. Like, we've got information about the clientele, how many they have, who they service, et cetera, but I find it hard to believe that they would keep track of such statistics. The police service would probably be better to comment on that.
You're probably right. The only thing I was thinking was, I think with Belleville, our next closest location, I think, is like Bancroft. So it's, you know, whatever we've observed would be for the entire region. So you're right that the OATC wouldn't have it, so maybe we can ask a couple of like-sized communities if through their police force they can provide us that information.
Okay.
So, thank you for that.
Yeah, Councillor Kelly.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just in this report we got, there's 70 clinics in Ontario, and just kind of piggybacking with Councillor Sanderson, I was wondering if it's possible to find out of the 70 clinics that Ontario has with the OATC, how many, if any, are based in a medical building, if you will, as opposed to where they're connected with other doctors or other services, if that's possible.
Okay, the staff will make note of that. Please keep in mind, though, in terms of what's been provided on this handout is this organization, and their statistics is based on this organization. There are other clinics that provide this type of service that wouldn't be in that capture. In other words, what I'm trying to say is it's a little bit more prevalent than you think. So the staff will make note of that, but I think you're looking for something that goes beyond just this particular organization, but just methadone clinics in general. Is that what you're asking? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Beltutis.
Through the chair, why was, I don't know if we can answer this here, but maybe we can get the answers from the clinic and from the managers, like why they chose this particular spot as opposed to other places in Belleville. It was brought up like the methadone clinic is needed, and it's not, but why there? Why not? Is it because it's close to downtown, close to the old clinic? Is it because of bus routes? Is it because of parking? Or is it because of, you know, those type of things? I don't know if you can answer that.
So I'm sort of the chair. I don't know the exact reasons, but I do know that they have the agent, but they also had an applicant that was doing an intensive search as well that deals with, so yeah, there was an intensive search to find suitable locations, but whether or not that was because they were in close proximity to their, I'm assuming some of it is they're in close proximity, but also I suppose there's just the idea that they need a suitable location of a certain size and parking. I think that's what she said in her opening comments, but we can also contact the director of the OATC, and there are some concerns that were expressed by the public, so they can respond to those as well, and we can ask them if they wanted to provide that information as well.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and if I could just add, the deputation did refer to the fact that it was a newer, larger facility that included on-site parking, which makes it much more convenient for their clients. And then also, in order to provide some expanded services because of the size of the location, talked about early mornings and also some case management and addiction services. So it sounds like they need space for counselors and things like that. So there's probably just more within that building. But we can get that information. So I had Mr. Jennings next.
Thank you. I'd like to comment, I guess like Councillor Sanderson and Kelly, about the police statistics. And it seems to me we're just moving a clinic that exists. So can't we get a police report on the current statistics of crime associated with its current location? And then if there is some kind of increase in size or services, maybe we can speculate from there. But we have the current data, or we should, already.
Yeah, staff have made note in terms of getting a comment. The only thing that I'm going to say, and I'm going to take this liberty just to caution that it would be difficult that if a police officer got a call for service on Front Street, that it may not necessarily be attributable to that location. So the proximity may not necessarily be the case. And you know, refer to somebody who's transient, for example, who isn't even down there conducting that business or being there for any reason, they could get caught up in that statistic. So maybe calls for service to that location would be.
I agree. I think that should be built into, and it will be captured that way. But I think you'll have the same issue no matter where it is in the downtown area of Belleville.
So I think the best thing to do is probably frame it around calls for service at that address, because that would be something the police would do, and they do that for every address, whether it's something they frequent or they don't. Versus, I just want to be careful that we're not capturing statistics that aren't applicable to that particular, so calls for service at that actual address would probably be reasonable, or if you're comfortable with that.
No, I agree, and I think it also would be more representative of Belleville's situation as opposed to these 70 other locations. They won't be the same as Belleville's. So I don't know if they're as relevant as our own statistics.
Okay. Staff have made note of that. Any other questions? Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I have another.
Yeah, sorry.
Could we get an update on, or some kind of future plans of the safety village if the police department is moving out? Is it staying, or is it going to be sold with the property and redeveloped?
Yeah, I'll have the clerk speak to that one.
So through the chair to the committee, the reality is that is an ongoing process. So working through that property will, the Children's Safety Village have a long history there. They own the buildings, we own the property, so that is to be determined. It will be something that has been discussed and will continue to be discussed as we speed towards the date of the Bell Police Nurse moving off-site. But at this point, it's to be determined what their long-term future is on that site. And we had the president of the Children's Safety Village at the podium, so she has concerns. But what their long-term future there is at this point is not determined.
Okay. Mr. Joyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a tough decision, obviously. We vote effectively next meeting in terms of the actual wording, but in preparation for that, I've just got some comments as I was listening to everyone in the audience that we should really make sure we cover off as part of our next proposal. First of all, it's the preconceived notions. I kept hearing that all the time, and I think we need to define what that is, whether it's crime-related or loitering or whatever. We use that generality, and I think that needs to be addressed. Confidentiality, they talked about that a lot, and I don't see how confidentiality is any worse, if not better, where they're suggesting. And I'm not suggesting this is the ideal location, but to me, it's no worse than where we are downtown in terms of, because there's nowhere to go other than just in that vicinity. They talked about putting in a medical clinic. Let's ignore the hospital issue. That's a whole separate issue in itself, but medical clinic. It really depends on where the clinic's located. Clinic or no clinic, it's where that clinic itself is located, i.e. commercial, residential, whatever. It is a medical type facility in its previous life there, so it already had that kind of dynamic. So it really becomes a function of where it's located. Residential, they talked about that a lot too, and I think if we did a study of residential downtown and future residential downtown, I think it becomes an interesting dynamic there also, because I know they were concerned with all the residential in that vicinity. But as I say, all the lofts downtown, all the new development that's going down, it is a big push for residential, so obviously they would have a voice. The concept of loitering, my thought was maybe you would just do some fencing around the entrance area and try to control the people as they're coming and going, both for confidentiality, but also for when they're leaving the building, and garbage bins and things like that to try to deal with some of the other concerns they have. And then the traffic flow they mentioned too, I guess I'm not sure the traffic flow is going to be any better or worse than what it is when it was the Medigas, but I can't comment on that, so I guess that's maybe one of those assumptions we have to resolve. But those are just some general thoughts that I think we need to look at before we make a decision on the next meeting when it comes back to the table. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Williams.
Thank you to you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I echo a lot of sentiments that have already been said by our colleagues. We are looking for a win-win situation here. I think when it comes to communication, there are definitely some concerns, and I think on the social side, I think that this, and it's been said many times, that this is important still for the community. And I think what we're trying to do, aside from looking at good planning, which we're tasked to do, is also to make sure we're listening and we're addressing any concerns by the constituents. And I think it's been already stated. The points I had have already been asked by staff. So police report for that location, traffic study, looking at bus routes, parking, residential. One that was mentioned also from staff I'd like to have looked at is property taxes, whether we've seen is there a possibility of those businesses seeing a decrease, increase, the same? What are we seeing with property taxes on that? And I think for the most part, we're looking at a business here that is moving into another part of what I consider downtown. Is there another impact, or is there an impact at all? And I think, I can speak myself that I lived downtown for a year, 10 years ago, but the methadone clinic was there. It seems like yesterday. And I lived down there for a year, just across from it. And I can say personally, I did not see anything from that location, hear anything. A lot of times you didn't know what it was. You just didn't really see it. There were other concerns at that time downtown. Of course, you heard people playing bongos, or down the road, we had people intoxicated, maybe falling down stairways and what have you. But there was always a mix of separate things that were not necessarily from that. And I think what I want to make sure is that we're not creating a stigma or a stereotype on people that need this. And, you know, we do have this clinic, other places, as has been mentioned throughout the city. One that hasn't been mentioned is at Shoppers. So Shoppers Drug Mart does have them both at Dundas and Sydney. Sydney for a long time and Dundas just recently. And when in there and dealing with it, you'd be hard-pressed to understand who those people are or why. It is pretty anonymous, and those people are serviced there. So we do have, besides the other location on Dundas, we do have other locations in the city that are being used. And a couple points, I know that we have some handouts that I wanted to make on it. Number one, and I understand, sorry, this isn't planning, but I just want to speak to it real quick. Number one, that people who are on methadone, that is the cure. There is no cure. So those people are on that, and when they are on it, they are dependent, but they are normally non-aggressive, and there's other problems. And number two is that I think we have a duty in society to make sure we're taking care of the most vulnerable the safest way we can, and I think that's been mentioned by almost everyone who came to the podium. So when it comes to planning, I think just again, I'd like to have some more questions as been asked from staff, as Mr. Joyce and the rest of our colleagues, and I hope we can get some more information to make a proper decision in our next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Just after listening to some of the other comments from the board members, committee members, and hearing the speakers today, took lots of notes, and we heard from Karen, 14 employees, small business, the sport and lawn, and some concerns about the notification with the signs, and hearing from the residents. I guess this is all new to me, but you sit and hear the stories, you wonder why the provincial government, over the last 20 or 30 or 40 years, doesn't matter what party's in, hasn't worked with cities or communities in planning to make this part of the medical community. Because there is a stigma, whether we think there is or not, there is. The perception for those that need help. We heard Kate mention that it's not all heroin addicts and running wild downtown. It's people that have had knee surgeries that got addicted to opioids or medication, prescribed medication. Yet the provincial government continues to dump this on municipalities, asking communities to put it in residential or commercial areas, where I feel it is a medical condition. So it should be under a hospital or a clinic or with public health. It just doesn't make sense that they're asking municipalities to put this in residential community, and I think it would end the stigma. People would go in and get their treatment, and it's in a medical facility, and there is some confidentiality with that. So I look to the folks in Toronto at Queen's Park, and they've missed the boat on this for the last 30 or 40 years. How long this problem has been going on? Those are my comments.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Brown.
As I declared, I have a business that's in proximity to the OATC clinic. The concerns I think that were expressed may be based on a misconception in terms of what downtown's concerns have been relative. David, I think you mentioned them. The loitering issue, and as goes with any loitering issue, there is trash and cigarette butts and coffee cups and that type of thing. I want to point out, however, is that every methadone dispensary located in the city of Belleville is in a residential or near a residential area. I don't believe that it is related to the clinic itself, but more so how it is managed, both interior and exterior, to the actual location. If you look at Shoppers Drug Mart, they don't have a loitering issue. If you look at Rexall Pharmacy, they don't have a loitering issue. However, where it appears to be other private clinics, for instance, the one at the Bayview Mall, they do have a loitering issue. So I want to be clear that from a downtown perspective, and having a business nearby. It is not the clientele. It is not theft. It is not crime. It is a loitering issue that creates a perception with customers and visitors coming downtown, having to run the gauntlet through the people who are loitering. It is not related to any of the other things that may have been described.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I just have some for staff. And I know in an issue like this, certainly it is emotionally charged within the community. And it was talked about tonight, the stigma and perception versus the facts. And I think that's the most important thing, that we're actually looking at it from a fact-based perspective. And, you know, I've read some comments online in terms of this particular health program that is operated. And there are a lot of perceptions and stigma and misconceptions, and it's unfortunate. And this is not unique to Belleville, it's every community. So it's important that, that the facts be clear. Also, from our perspective, we're looking at planning criteria. So we have to remember as a committee that we're looking at the provincial policy statement, we're looking at the official plan, and we're looking at zoning. I'd also, through my research, I've looked at the Ontario Human Rights Commission, and they actually wrote the City of Belleville in 2012 when they were looking at zoning for methadone, and actually cautioned the city in terms of uses, and basically said that the Human Rights Commission partners with individuals and communities throughout the province to end discrimination and to break down barriers that vulnerable groups face. And one such barrier is people zoning. So instead of looking at the land use, that we have to make sure we're not looking at the people, and we can't zone people. And in addition to that, the Human Rights Commission in 2015 wrote a letter to the City of Windsor cautioning them on the same in terms of their zoning and official plan, and actually went as far as to suggest that they support the inclusion of methadone clinics under the definition of medical office. And that can take on a very large category in terms of what that may be. And they said they also support removing any zoning or licensing requirements that restrict locations of clinics and pharmacies so that people who use these services do not experience any adverse impact discrimination. And so I just like staff to provide comment in terms of Human Rights Commission. Again, looking at the criteria, making sure that the committee is prepared to make a decision looking at this from a fact-based perspective on this criteria, knowing full well that whatever recommendation we provide to council, and council then determines, there is an appeal process. And so therefore we want to make sure that we're looking at that criteria. So I'd ask staff to include comment on Human Rights Commission dialogue, please. Any other questions or comments on that? All in favor? Motion's carried. So we're on to report 7.1, request for use of the one street name, Genlin Development south of Bell Boulevard. Owner is Genlin Properties. Manager of Approvals, report number APS-2019-16. The resolution reads that the Belleville Planning Advisory Committee recommends the following to City Council. The Belleville City Council authorized the use of Genlin Way as a new street name for the Genlin Development south of Bell Boulevard. Moved by Mr. Joyce, seconded by Councillor Culhane. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Motion's carried. 7.2, recommendation report for proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 10-245 as amended, 150 St. Paul Street, City of Belleville, County of Hastings, file number B-77-1078. Applicant owner is Schnell Investments Limited. The agent is Sig Schnell. Policy planners report number PP-2019-37. And the resolution reads that the Planning Advisory Committee recommends the following to City Council. That application B-77-1078 to amend zoning bylaw number 10-245 is amended regarding 150 St. Paul Street, City of Belleville, County of Hastings be approved as follows. That zoning bylaw number 10-245 is amended, be amended by rezoning the subject lands from general industrial M2 zone to non-retail commercial C513 zone with special provisions to permit a residential use accessory to a commercial use. I need a motion. Moved by Mr. Baltudas, seconded by Mr. Jennings. Any questions or comments on that one? All in favor? Motion's carried. 7.3 is draft report municipal comprehensive review of urban serviced area official plan update, file number B-50-5-8, manager policy planning's report number PP-2019-32. The resolution reads that report number PP-2019-32 dated May 6, 2019 regarding draft report municipal comprehensive review of urban serviced area official plan update be received as information, and that staff commence the notification of public, city departments and other agencies and sources as outlined in this report to advise them of an upcoming Public Information Center and public meeting on June 3rd, 2019, and that staff report back at such time as input from the public, commenting agencies, municipal departments, and the approval authority has been received, assessed, and addressed to the satisfaction of the Engineering Development and Service Department. Need a motion, please? Councillor Williams, Councillor Culhane. Any questions or comments? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. This is a great report, and I think it's timely when we look at some new economic development and intensification. We received a report, 2012 RFA. I know this one was done by Watson in association with Dillon. Is there any correlation between that report? Was some of that input into this report, or is that going to be something that is separate?
I think you're talking about the intensification report. They would have looked, part of their analysis would have been the opportunity for intensification in the city centers established through the that official, what became an official plan update. So they would have looked at that in determining opportunities. So yeah, I guess there is sort of, like, from a historical perspective and opportunities, yeah, they did look at that.
Fantastic. So I could throw that one out and just keep this one, right? Thank you very much. It looks really good.
Councillor Sanderson.
Yeah, couple comments. On the, early on, it talks about over the 20-year planning horizon, the city is expected to add a total of approximately 1,510 jobs on the employment lands. I would say, based on what's happening today, that number seems fairly conservative. When you think about Hexo, Costco, some of the new hotels, other opportunities maybe with Kellogg's and Procter & Gamble, I think that's really, really on the low side. I would think we'd have 1,500 jobs in the next 10 years rather than 20. So, just one comment. And then the other comment, because the document's dated May the 6th of this year, later on in the document, and unfortunately the pages aren't numbered. So let me just see if I can give you this section. So it's section 9, employment land needs. So it'll be under 9.1. In the northeast industrial area, second paragraph from the bottom, says the Sears site is currently vacant and provides an opportunity to accommodate future employment growth. Well, it's already happened. Hexo are there. So the document needs to be updated to reflect the current situation. Those are my only two comments.
Okay, staff, do you have anything? You were going to say something about the other part on the jobs.
No. Just, so in terms of, so this is sort of is a document that kind of started, and then by the time it gets approved, things have happened. In the meantime, we have had discussions, and they did do a comprehensive review for the city previously, and I guess the positive thing is, I think it was in 2014, I believe, or 2011, is that their analysis was pretty accurate based upon even up to this point in time sort of idea. So, yeah, we kind of get blips and rushes of, you know, whether it's building or jobs, but over the long term, as economists, they do stand behind their figures. But I think in terms of the staff report, I also said that just because this might be a 20-year time frame, like if we blow past those projections in 5 years' time when we update our comprehensive review, that's the opportunity to sort of update those numbers as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, and the report's actually April 11th. The date on the top is in reference to the staff report, and then this is being an attachment. So not that a month matters, but any other questions or comments? Yeah, Councillor Kelly.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Is this available online for people to look?
So we are going to, so once this goes to council and we establish our PIC and public meeting date at PAC, we'll upload this to the site and we'll have notices. And I know already the communications department knows that we want one of those news releases so that we can send people to this as well. So we'll also send the link, the news release, directly to the Chamber of Commerce and the Home Builders Association.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on this? I do have one. It's on page 101 of our report here, just in terms of the outline of the timeline. And a public information center has been scheduled for June the 3rd, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. I'm a little concerned with respect to the time. Again, if we really want full public consultation, we need to be cognizant of the fact that we do have a community that is employed, and Councillor Sanderson referred to the numbers, and it's growing all the time, which is a good thing. So can I get staff's comments in terms of, was there consideration given for, in addition to a daytime, because I understand that we have businesses, stakeholders there that would participate during the day, and that makes sense for them. But in terms of the general public and things of that nature, has there been consideration for something outside of business hours?
So the intention was to, because they, you know, in their terms of reference, they come for one day sort of idea. So the intention was to piggyback both of those to sort of get an extra meeting, like a public information center. And there'd still be an opportunity when our PAC meeting started at 5:30 for members of the public to have input. The 3 to 5 was more just as to be able to wander around, look at presentation boards and make comments, but we would still expect to put those presentation boards online as well for maybe people that are working during the day and can't make those meetings.
Okay, so then the expectation was that process will continue at the planning stage?
Yes, yeah. And it would also be available online for people to make comments upon.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So the motion is on the floor. Any other questions or comments on that? All in favor? That motion is carried. Number 8, information matters. 8.1, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment monitoring report. Report number up to May 6, 2019. Can I get a motion to receive that? And Mr. Baltutis, Councillor Culhane. Any questions or comments? Councillor Sanderson.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's a little bit of an eye test, but the two items that date back to 2017 and 2018 listed on here is B771021 and B771040. I'm just wondering, they both read deferred at PAC and awaiting, in one case it says zoning bylaw to be addressed later. That was in 2017. And the other one says awaiting a revised site plan based on CN. So I'm just wondering if they're still valid and how much longer we're going to continue to track them.
Refer that to staff.
The first one, the Barkama property, that I understand has just recently been sold or is in the process of being sold, and the owner or new owner is intending to move forward with bringing that application back to the committee and essentially reactivating it. And the Rosebush property, that was deferred pending the completion of a traffic study. This is a property at the corner of Airport Parkway and College Street East. And it was a proposed gas bar and among other uses. I believe the the traffic study was completed. It was peer reviewed by the city, and we're awaiting the applicant's response to our peer review, which raised some concerns with the results of their study and the recommendations that had an impact on CN. There's a couple of railway crossings in the vicinity there, and the proposed commercial development could have an impact on them. So they have some work to do there to satisfy the city and CN.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the information item? Just two things I'm going to mention just for public consumption, because I have had some inquiries. 427 Farnham Street, which is a popular application, and there's notes here that applicant is to review the public concerns and resubmit. And we're still waiting on that. I'm looking for staff in there acknowledging that. Yes. And the other one is 250 Sydney Street to add cannabis processing. There's notation that applicants to submit additional information. Are we still waiting on that information?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. So there's a motion on the floor to receive that. All in favor? Motion's carried. General businesses and inquiries. Mr. Baltutis.
Through the chair, one of our last meetings, I guess, in the previous of this group here, and with regards to Holgate Tire, I've been past that site numerous times, and I understood with my recollection from that meeting that Mr. Holgate was going to clean up that site. Like, we gave him this rezoning, we approved that. As far as I know, it all went through. But every time you drive past there, like, there's the mound of tires, and the place doesn't look any better than it did prior to him coming in for that, for the rezoning and the approval. So how does, I know it's, maybe it's not us, maybe it's the bylaw officer or the...
Okay, so I will say this, and it was actually the last term that we dealt with that. Okay, yeah. Time flies. The other side of it is, Mr. Holgate pointed out, he is a provincially designated depot for tires. And I recall in his deputation that he actually has no control over the tires that show up at his facility. He is designated as such, and then there's a contractor who comes to pick up the tires. And I know his commitment to this committee when it was discussed that he was going to call that the pickup service, if you will, to expedite some of that. But I'll refer that over to staff for anything additional, but that's what I can recall.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be an ongoing challenge. I know our bylaw enforcement staff are working with Mr. Holgate to try and address those concerns and issues, and it's one of those ones, as the chair has mentioned, I think because of the nature of his designation, it'll be an ongoing issue for us.
Okay. Any other under general business? Okay. Before I move adjournment, I have some closing remarks. The Planning Advisory Committee's applicable decisions will be forwarded to the City Council for consideration, forming part of the agenda for the City Council meeting to be held. Should you wish to speak to the City Council on any item, you must contact the City Clerk by the end of business day, the Tuesday prior to the applicable Council meeting, to be included as a delegation at that meeting. And I need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Sanderson, Mr. Baltutis, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you.